So now, what about UI? So user interface design is pretty much the complement of UX. It's all about the look and feel, the presentation and interactivity of a product. A user interface is the point of interaction really between the user and a digital device or a product. So for example, in our smartphones or touchscreens is one of those, or the touchpad that you use maybe like in those coffee machines that have a touchscreen built into them. That's also another example. And in relation to websites and mobile apps, UI design really considers, again, the look, the feel, how you interact with the product, and it's really all about making sure that the user interface of a product is as intuitive as possible for the user, so that you can have them happy and they can keep coming back and keep using that mobile app or website that you built. This means also taking a close look at each and every visual aspect of that the user might encounter in your application. So this is where we start thinking about the different elements like the icons and the buttons and the typography too. So the fonts that you're using, the colors that you're using, the spacing, the graphics, and also just making your design responsive, which is really important nowadays that we have so many different phones and different laptops and iPads and all the different ways that you can consume media, right? So with all these things, it's really important for you to really be able to make sure that it's responsive. So UI design is responsible for transferring pretty much a product's development and researching content and its layout into an experience for users that is attractive and is pretty much guiding and responsive. So now we're going to talk about pretty much what the difference is between UI and UX. And so to sum it up here, the main difference is that UX design is all about the overall feel of experience, while the UI design is all about how the product interfaces look and function. So pretty much like the UX design considers the user's entire journey to solve a problem. So what steps do they need to take? What tasks do they need to complete? How straightforward is the whole experience pretty much? And a lot of their work focuses on finding out what kinds of problems the users come up against and how a certain product might end up solving them. UI design, on the other hand, considers more of the visual aspects of the user's journey. So this includes things like what screens you have, the different places where you touch the screen, and just like things like tapping a button, scrolling down a page, or swiping through a photo gallery. These are kinds of things that you consider. And so while like UX design maps out the whole user journey, the UI design focuses on the details that make it possible. So, that's not to say that UI design like it's all about looks. UI design also has a huge impact on like whether the product is accessible and inclusive, and that's something that's really important to also think about. You can think of questions like, how can different color combinations be used to create contrast, or how can they enhance the readability of something, or even like what color pairings can you use to cater to people who are colorblind, right? So these are different things that you need to consider. I was just told that there's also questions, so I'm gonna actually answer those in a bit. I just want to get through at least just the first few things for the topic, and then I'll get to answer your guys' questions. So hopefully, now you're starting to see how the UX and UI design are two very different things. So to summarize here, UX design is all about identifying and solving the user's problems, and UI design is all about creating intuitive and aesthetically pleasing interactive interfaces. UX design also comes first in the product development process, and UI usually comes a lot later after you've done some testing and prototyping and doing the wireframes, which I'll be talking about in a bit. The UX designer maps out the bare bones of the user journey, and then the UI designer that fills it in with visual and interactive elements. And UX can also apply to any kind of product, service, or experience. Like I said before, it doesn't have to be like a website or a mobile app. Obviously, in our case, for a hackathon and for anybody interested in tech, most likely it'll be some kind of technical product, but pretty much this is what it applies to. And UI is specific to digital products and experiences. So user interfaces is something that's very technical that it's part of these applications. So we've looked at the differences, between UX and UI. Now we can take a look at how they actually work together. And so Here's a quote. You might be wondering if one is more important than the other, but reality is that like both of them are really important. And so this is a quote from a designer, Helga Moreno, who says that something that looks great but is difficult to use is exemplary of great UI and poor UX, while something very usable that looks terrible is exemplary of great UX and poor UI. So this is pretty much a great example of like how both of them work hand in hand, and you can't really have one or the other. It's really important to have both of them be really good. So here's an example of a user interface from a mobile app. So as you can see from here, there's one on the left and one on the right. The one on the left has a lot of inconsistencies in the UI. So the one on the right is nicely laid out. The text and the fonts are all pretty much consistent. And on the left, you can see that at the top, you have a really bold header, and then the text is gray. But at the bottom, it's like the text is gray, and then the actual content is blue. So you want to make sure that your content is consistent. All your UI elements are consistent in the design. So this is an example of how the design can be bad in this case. We're also here having two buttons. So the one on the left has a drop shadow. The one on the right also has a drop shadow, but as you can see, these are a bit different. The one on the left kind of reminds me of those really old websites that just used to like have drop shadows all over the place. But in more modern mobile apps, you start to see more like more of the ones on the right side, which use shadows that use the background color instead of using black as the shadow. So obviously the one on the right looks a lot nicer in this case compared to that. Here you can see both login screens as well. And the problem here is that there's little distinction between the primary and the secondary buttons. If you look on the left side, the login, sign up, forgot password are all the same. They have the same prominence, I guess. They are all blue. And on the right side, it's better structured where you have the login be the primary function, the primary thing you want people to do. And then you have sign up as a secondary, and then forgot password as a third type of thing that usually happens very not that often. So you want majority of the time for people to just go straight to login. And that's what makes the design on the right more successful than the one on the left. In this case here, there's a lack of text hierarchy. So you can see on the right side, pretty much that the text, there's larger headers or smaller text for less important information or things that just can go in the background. On the left side, there is more of like a consistent sort of font used all throughout, and it has all the same size, same color and everything. And it might not look terrible, but it's really hard to kind of like discern and see which are the different elements and how they relate to one another. So that's what makes the right design here more successful. And yeah, and if you guys haven't figured out already, everything on the right is what's, it's ideal, and everything on the left is what, has issues. So here, for example, you have the icons that you use for a mobile app or a website, and these might not be a big deal, but here you can see how the ones on the left they don't mesh together that well. They're very inconsistent. The ones on the right are all like consistent throughout with the stroke and the spacing and even the fill. The ones on the left, you can see the alarm clock is all black, has a black fill, while the house is like only outlined. So they're not really, related that well. Here's another example of elements that are not aligned. So on the right side, you have a header and you have the text for the body, and these are well aligned. The ones on the left, not really. You have like the header centered, but then, the content is actually left aligned. So this is something else also to look at. For most of you guys, I'm sure you probably can see that the right side is more pleasant to look at and it looks more neat and orderly. So that's something that you want to achieve with your design. Here's another one. This is a mobile app, and here the problem that we see is that there's a difference in contrast. So on the right, there's a high contrast between the purple and the white, and then on the left side, you can see that there's a purple icon, but there's like the gray circle in the background, and it does not really look that nice, or it's just really hard to see. There's really low contrast, and it just hurts your eyes. You don't want to look at that for too long. Same thing with having really bright colors. It really messes things up. Another one here is also confusing forms. So on the right side, for example, you enter the password and it will tell you, hey, password's incorrect. If you don't remember your password, here's a link to reset it. So it's very user-friendly. And if you don't know your password, then you can just right away click it and then go to that. On the left side, it's like you just enter your password and it tells you there's an error. And it's like, okay, great. What's the error? Like, it doesn't tell you exactly, hey, your password's wrong or something else happened. So as you can see here, the right side has a more user-friendly design. Another one here. So pretty much as you can see on the right side, the elements are well spaced out, and also the X to kind of just, exit out or just delete that row is a lot bigger. And so it's easier for you to tap it with your finger. On the left side, that just looks terrible. And like, if you had that on your phone, it'd be so hard to actually try to like pinch and like try to tap that X. You might end up hitting follow by mistake if you didn't want to do that. So that's something else to also consider. And here's the last one I have for you guys. You can see here, this is pretty obvious. The one on the left side is pixelated and it's low quality. Well, the one on the right side is a very nice high quality photo. So this is something else also to keep in mind a lot, is to really use high quality assets as much as you can in your designs. I know sometimes we just Google images and we find whatever we find, we end up using that looks, I guess, decently good. But in reality, if you really have a nice high quality asset, it will just bring your design to the next level and it'll really resonate with the users that you have. So as you can see, UI, UX really go hand in hand. Imagine if you came up with an awesome idea for an app, you did the user research, you figured out exactly what features are needed, you did the whole user journey, and then and your app really offers something innovative, something cool. But then if the user downloads it and then the text on the screen is barely legible, the buttons maybe are too close, or they keep hitting the wrong buttons by mistake, at that point, it just kind of ruins the whole thing, as beautiful as it might look, right? So this is something that happens a lot. On the other hand, you might also find a really nice looking website, only to find out that it's a real pain to use. So you can never have so good UI can never make up for a bad UX. If the experience is really bad, no matter how good something looks, it's just going to be bad to use. It's something that you're not going to be using a lot, and your customers are not going to enjoy using. So that's something that is really important, and it really shows how the UX and the UI complement each other. And with how competitive everything is, how many apps are out there, how many people are creating these things, it's really important that you guys get both aspects right of it. Obviously for the hackathon this weekend, there probably isn't a lot of time to do all these different things, but definitely try to at least consider some of these elements and make sure you implement them in your design. And I think that will really go a long way. So before I actually move on to the UI UX design process, I want to take a look at some of the questions you guys are asking. So let me take a look at that real quick. Who was the author of that quote? I think the author was there in the slide, if I'm not mistaken. If it wasn't, I'll find it out for you guys and put it back in there. So I'll do that at the end of the presentation. Alrighty, so let me share my screen again. Hold on, having a bit of an issue. 1 second. Okay, do you guys see okay? Yep. All right, so next thing I wanted to go towards is the UI UX design process. Pretty much there's a whole methodology behind this and how you can actually create a successful design. So the UI UX design has 4 phases, the whole process. So starting with user research, design, testing, and implementation. During the user research phase, you pretty much find out who your target users are and what their needs are in relation to the website or mobile app or anything really that you're making. In the design phase, then you map out pretty much the user's journey across the product. You consider things like information architecture, which I'll be talking about to you guys in a little bit. You also create wireframes, which pretty much creates like a template for the product that you're making. With the skeleton of the product already mapped out at that point, then you can create a really like nice prototype, which you can use to test with your users. After testing, then you can bring the whole design to life pretty much by implementing it through code and using technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and all that. So I'll be talking a bit about that as well. So the first step here is user research. And user research is really essential to the whole UX design process. It really is the starting point for a UX design. Through research, we really learn, about the users, how they behave, their goals and motivations, and what they actually need out of the design. It also shows us, how they can, actually navigate the system, where they come up with some problems, and how they feel when they actually interact with the mobile app or the website that you're building. It's also important to remember that what you think might be intuitive for yourself might not be for your users. So that's something that is really key here to take away, and that's why conducting research is on your actual users is so important. And again, you can do this by doing interviews, creating online surveys, all kinds of things. One key takeaway here that I want to give to you guys, one word, if I want you guys to remember, I guess here, is empathy. And so when you're designing, you'll be working with groups of users who, come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. And so your job really is to try to understand and see why they behave the way they do. And, not to like change it or influence it in any way, but really to just try to accommodate that within the product that you're building. And that really is truly what, empathy is all about and why it's so important in the UX design process. The next thing here is design. So, where design comes creating wireframes and prototypes, which is kind of the fun part of UX design, at least for me. This gives you something more tangible to test on real and potential users that you have. And that's really important when you want to make your designs more usable, right? This means designing a satisfying user experience, and that involves really creating a whole customer journey for the users and helping them really find what they're looking for in the product that you're making. Customers will usually follow like a certain process or journey anyway when they're performing an action. This is usually because there's just so many apps and so many things out there that people are already used to doing certain things. They know where they need to scroll, they know where they need to press a button, they know like how things work generally. So people already have a previous experience with products that might be similar to yours. So you really have to think about how you can accommodate your product the way that the user already behaves. Sometimes it's not really a good idea to like reinvent the wheel and try to like create a whole new way that the user can actually behave. It can be disorienting, and it can sometimes create a really bad experience for the user. So the design of your product really revolves around functionality and usability rather than the colors and the pictures and all of that. Those are kind of secondary things, but at the very core, you need to think about how your product is usable and also the functionality of it. So within design, I mentioned this earlier, was information architecture. So a user, who is overwhelmed by too much info can really get lost, or, when they navigate your website or they go to your app and really have a bad experience. So in order to avoid that, it's really important to do information architecture and really handle that within your design. So the purpose of that pretty much is just to structure, label, and just organize all the content you have on a website so that users can know exactly what they need to perform the tasks you want them to do and what you want them to accomplish, right? So for example, on Amazon, you need to find a way to organize all the content on the Amazon website so that users end up actually purchasing and buying from the platform, right? So as a designer for, let's say, the Amazon site, you want to make sure that the way that you design the page for the different items is in a way that, you know, makes it intuitive for the user to just be able to hit buy, you know, and just make that purchase right away. So that is something that, you know, information architecture really comes through with. And so through information architecture, really, that's where you find out not just how, you know, every piece of the website or mobile app can fit together, but also how each of these items relates to one another and all the different parts of the structure. And this process helps the user understand what to expect when they navigate the website. So that way it's easy for them to do that. So the next thing I have is wireframing. So this is when we actually start sketching out and start creating the different parts of our application. So wireframing in UX design really refers to just an illustration or a diagram of a website, mobile app, or software. It looks at different components here. So one of them here is the allocation of space on the page. So how you work with white space and how you allocate the different elements. How you distribute the images and the content within the page. If you have too many photos or too much text, that's a problem. How you prioritize content. So what's really most important to you and your users and what they would like to get out of that. Also, what functionality is available to the user in the application and what is the actual behavior that's intended for them. So like by creating these prototypes, you'll get to see these wireframes, you'll get to see how the user interacts and how they go from one point to the next within your mobile app or website. As you can see, well, there's a bit of highlighting here, but for the most part, wireframes rarely contain any color or images. It's just very basic sketches, which used to be always done on paper, but nowadays people use tools like Figma and Adobe Xd and Sketch to really do that, which I'll be talking about a bit later. And pretty much, you know, there's none of this like styling or anything because it just helps you more easily understand the relationship between the different templates, and there's no distraction, you know, between that and just you kind of getting the whole user journey. So by focusing first on the navigation and the structure of the website, which is really important, you become less distracted by the visual aspect of it, which is kind of hard, at least for me. I always like to instantly see how it's going to look and just, you know, get that rewarding feeling that this looks great. But it's something that you kind of need to do from the very beginning in order to make a design that's very effective. And there are, again, many awesome wireframing tools out there. And like I said, I'll be going over those in a bit. The next step after you create your wireframes and you create these sketches, then you create actual prototypes. So when you move on to a prototype, this pretty much is a draft version of your website or your app that is as close as possible to, you know, how you want it to look like before you actually begin coding. This allows you to really explore and experiment, you know, with ideas, try different things out, and you can also check the functionality and the usability before you start to develop the application and put a bunch of time into it. You want to make sure that you have a solid design before you actually start coding away and, you know, like, you know, you realize you made a mistake or you want to fix something. So that's really important. Again, the intention behind it is to, you know, make different features more clear, and you're really able to see how the overall design works together and just fix any mistakes really that you might come across. And by building a prototype of the design, again, you save a lot of time. And, you know, when you work for a company, you'll also be saving them a lot of money. So that's something that's really important to consider and think about. All right, so this is the third phase, which is testing. So for testing, you know, testing is a core part really of the UX design process. It allows you to improve upon the product that you're making or the site design you're making. It's a great way to really just eliminate any problems or user issues that you probably might not have seen in the design phase before you get to actually code your application. So one way of doing this is through usability testing. Usability testing is pretty simple. It's just a one-to-one usability session. So you pretty much meet with the users that, you know, you're intending this application to be used by, and they will just check it out, test it out, and you'll be able to really see what kind of problems they're having. So the whole idea is just for them to perform different tasks, like telling them to go to a certain page or click a certain button, while you just observe and see how, you know, they go about it. And there's different methods, you know, for doing this kind of user testing. So you can simply just observe their behavior and how they, you know, they do this. You can even create questionnaires or surveys to have people answer questions about how they felt using your application. You can even also do interviews as well to get that information out of them. So, you know, testing is a really important part of the whole process because at this point, this is right before you start coding your application. And so it's really important for you to, consider all these things and maybe identify any mistakes you might have seen and kind of maybe go back to the design phase again and try to, fix those things and test them out again before you actually move on to coding out your entire application. So that's something that really helps out a lot to prevent any future mistakes or just any time wasted, really. And now finally, we get to the implementation phase. So this is where you actually code your design, and you can use this by using different technologies. So, the very basics like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You can also use React and other frameworks as well. UI UX tools also sometimes provide code for styling. So some of the tools that we're going to be looking at, they give you the CSS code or the styling. So this allows you to look at the properties of the different elements you're having on your application, and you can actually take those and put them into your code, and just makes things a lot easier, at least from the styling perspective. It will give you like the hex codes for the colors that you need. It will give you the spacing and all of that for the buttons you're doing. So it really helps out a lot when it comes to the design and then the coding process after that. So speaking of UI UX tools, there's quite a few of these tools. There's I would say probably 3 that are the most popular tools that are used. Over time, these have become more popular. Some of them, are kind of emerging right now, but they're all pretty good. They pretty much do almost everything the same, but there's just, different features here and there that obviously make them a bit different and just give them a bit of an advantage in certain areas. And I play around with, a couple of them, and there's, quite some things that, quite a few things that are pretty much identical, to be honest. So you can't go wrong with using any of these tools. But these are the 3. So we have Sketch, we have Figma, we have Adobe Xd. So Sketch is actually probably one of the oldest ones. No, actually it is the oldest one out of all these 3 here. And the only thing with Sketch is that it's a Mac-only app. So if you're a Windows user, unfortunately, Sketch doesn't work on there, but it definitely is a great app, and it has a lot of support and plugins and things like that for you to use. It's a very mature platform that you can check out if you have a Mac. The next one is Figma. Figma is the most recent one. The cool thing about Figma is that pretty much it allows you to collaborate. So think about it as like Google Docs but for design. It's just a really cool thing that you can do, and it has a lot of other cool features as well. And it's getting a lot of traction, and it's really been picked up a lot by companies and startups. So it's something to look at. And last but not least, we have Adobe Xd, which is brought to you by Adobe, and they do Photoshop, Illustrator, and all that. So they have a very, they're very popular. Obviously, I mean, I use Photoshop and Illustrator a lot, and so it's very well supported. But it's also like relatively new as well. So there's new features that come out every now and then. The good thing about Xd is that it's 100% free. So it's downloadable on Windows and Mac. So it works pretty well. Figma, you actually have 2 options. You can either have you can go for the free trial, which gives you some limited functionality, but you can still use it. It has everything that you need. Or you have, an option to also pay as well, which gives you like additional projects and more things like that. But that's more like if you're working for a company or a startup and you have more projects under your belt that you need to take care of. But for the basics, I think it does just fine. But for today's workshop, I just wanted to show you guys a bit of Figma and how that works. So here's a few screenshots of that. So I know this is really bright after all those black slides. But this is kind of their slogan. It's Figma is about where teams design together. And I think the main thing that, they're pushing here is how you can actually, design alongside other people in your team and keep everybody in the loop about how your design is going, and just for them to be able to use the different elements for their own projects, right? So for example, a designer can get on Figma, start creating prototypes and start setting colors and shapes and things like that. And a developer can also jump in and actually check all of that, and on their own end be able to code and grab all those different styles from the prototypes that are being created, instead of waiting, like, let's say, all the way until the end once everything's already been designed. So it really helps to speed things up. And it works a lot like Google Drive, actually, where everybody can kind of jump in and in real time just collaborate and comment and do different things like that. So it's a really cool platform. The other cool thing too is that Figma is actually it's a web app, so you can use this in your browser, so anybody can have access to it. And they also have a desktop app that you can download as well. So here's one of the screenshots from their site with their features. So again, they have everything in the cloud. So pretty much, everything's really fast and quick, and really it allows you to collaborate with anybody else that you're working with in your team. So you can all go at it with the design and even leave comments and just feedback on how it can go. Here's some more of that. So design and prototype in Tandem. So again, Figma doesn't only just let you create, wireframes, which remember are like the basic sketches, but it also lets you actually create prototypes, which are like almost like fully featured. It looks almost like the final application that you're creating. So the prototypes are interactive. You can play around with them, and it's something that pretty much I think it's really rewarding to kind of see after you designed how your application can actually look. And at least for me, when I see that, it makes me really want to like get to actually code the application and make it come to life. So it's a really cool thing to see. And this is also something that's available, I believe, in Xd and Sketch, and pretty much all these tools are kind of like now competing with each other and trying to also have the same features. So you'll find those features everywhere else. Just check all the platforms out and see which one you like best. As I mentioned before, you can team up with different people. You can even invite people. Again, it works a lot like Google Docs. Like you can, edit permissions. You can have people view also your designs. It's just a really cool platform to work with. And the other cool thing too is that you can create design systems. So this is something that is really important because design systems allow you to create, let's say, a template of some sort, or a master template of how the buttons should look like, how the text should look like, the size, the fonts, the colors, the spacing, and all those types of elements. And when you create this template, you can save it, and then pretty much everybody in your team can use these different elements and use the templates to create more pages and more content for the mobile app or the website you're creating. So what this really helps you with is it helps to make sure that the content is consistent all throughout. Even though this is being worked on by maybe 4 or 5 people, it will help to make it easier to make sure that everything is consistent and everybody is using the same kind of look for your application, and doesn't become like a big mess of different styles and different layouts that won't look good in the end. So that's something that's really important. Yeah, so Figma, you can go to figma.com, and it's just really easy to create an account. And then from then you can actually, check different templates and play around with them. And I actually wanted to show you guys a few of those so you can kind of see what kind of functionality and features you can get from Figma. So give me 1 second. And yeah, I agree with Shauna. Google Docs editing capabilities is no joke. It is really cool to be able to just go at it like that for design, and just showing everybody pretty much how your design is looking and get instant feedback right away. And yeah, no download. It's free and quick. And yeah, the layout's really clean. I really love the UI that they use for it. So that's just it's really awesome. All right, so now I'm gonna open up the Figma application so you guys can see how that looks. Alrighty, so here's Figma. So when you open Figma, it'll show you the most recently viewed projects that you worked on. Here on this left side, you can search for them. You can see the most recent, like I said. There's also plugins, which I'll talk to you guys about in a bit. And you can also create different drafts pretty much by just doing this and creating a whole new file. So when you actually join Figma, there's different really cool templates that you can see of like how to get started with the application. So you'll pretty much be run through this whole Figma template and go through a tutorial. It's really a great way to get acquainted with the tools that they have. Pretty much everything here on the top is just your toolbar. You have pretty much here how you can create frames, which are the actual, I guess, like the rectangle shape that you use for your application. You can also create different shapes here. There's even a pen tool for those of you guys who are familiar with Illustrator and Photoshop. it kind of behaves the same way. You can also add text, and here's a hand tool and also comments. And the comments actually works again like Google Docs, where you can place comments anywhere you like and get feedback and answer questions. Here on the left side, you have all the different individual frames that you're using. So I'm going to go back to the beginning here. You can use the frame tool. This is another frame here, and how you can lay things out. You can see these are all clickable elements that you can create. Pretty much these are like layers in Photoshop. They work the same way. And again, these are buttons, and all the properties for these elements are all on the right side. So there's a design menu here. It shows you different options for aligning the elements, for their dimensions, their positions. You can set constraints, which also is also a really cool feature from Figma, because the constraints really allow you to make sure that everything stays in place no matter what the size of the screen you're viewing is. And that is something that you can actually, I believe, try out here. Let me see. In constraints here. So for example, here, if you have this frame and you try to change the height of it, as you can see the menu, the bar at the bottom will stay there. It won't like move or anything. So, and it's, look at the context of it and they'll make sure that it stays down there no matter what size you have created this on. Obviously, if you go to the right though, it kind of breaks, but this has a bottom constraint here so that it stays that way. So you can see resize the frame's height. It does that. This one's for the width. So if you resize the width, you can see that the buttons, they also resize. So it pretty much is very responsive no matter like what size you're using. I'll put this back. Yeah, so this is kind of like, an overview, I guess, the tools and different things that they have. But now I want to show you something else that's pretty cool, which is the actual wireframing. So these are pretty much the wireframes I was talking about earlier. So this is an example wireframe that you can create from the very beginning when you're developing you're designing your application. So you can create all these elements from scratch. There's a logo and the different links here and buttons. Also, these are all clickable elements. Again, you can edit them, change the colors, the sizing, the alignment, and all that. Here's another element you can add as well. This is just like a photo, and all the pretty much a placeholder text of the headers and all of that. The cool thing is that Figma also gives you like these as templates as well. So if you scroll here to the right, you'll see there's some examples that you can use for your own design. So you don't have to create this from scratch if you don't want. There's already some design systems out there that work very well, and so you can use those for your applications if you like. So here, for example, you have different sets of menu bars and different ways of doing that, depending on what you need. If you want the users here to register as a primary and log in as a secondary function, then you can use this. These are all different kinds of menu options you got. Here's more of like photos that you can have with headers and buttons and different body layouts as well. The nice thing too is that all of these, like, obviously they look great. They actually like go by the design elements and design rules. So there's a large header here, there's a bold header that's smaller, and there's like a plain text here. Spacing is awesome. And also it's really easy to see the different elements here when you take a look at them and just, discern them from the whole design. So this is another one here with buttons, with learn more buttons under each section. Here the buttons are, all blue. Here you can actually add, photos to these and do that. Here's a couple more sections as well. So, Figma here really gives you a lot of really nice templates and options for you to look at that will make prototyping a lot easier and really fast for you. Here's a few more as well. This is for like a website. You can put testimonials here. Again, when you're, coming up with a design for your website or mobile app from the very beginning, this just really gets you up and running really quickly. And you can pretty much see how your website can actually look in the end. Here's like a sign up form pretty much. And here's like a footer for the website. You can add with your copyright, with the social media, and then the important links you got. And you can take all these pieces together and then create this sample wireframe that Figma gave us here. So that's pretty much how you would work with the wireframes. And again, these were like layers like Photoshop. It's really easy to piece together, and you have your properties here on the right side. So it's really, really easy to get into and understand. So that's with wireframing. So as I mentioned during the presentation, the next step after wireframing is prototyping. So the cool thing is that you can take whatever design you make and then actually create a prototype of it. So here you can see this different app. This is called Photo App, and it has all these different pages for the mobile app. As you can see, it has even like a chat window. It has a profile with like follow button. Here's the chat. Also, you can look through a photo gallery. The cool thing about this is that there's different views here that you can look at. So for example, you have your wireframes, right, which were like very basic, but then you can actually now put the different elements the way they should look. And you can actually connect them, which is a really cool part of the whole prototype process. So here we're, in the design properties side menu, but if you go to prototype, you'll see this. You'll see all these arrows pop up and that take you from one place to the next. So what you can do with prototyping is you can, let's say, click this login button and set it so that when you click it or you tap it, it will take you to this screen, login screen here, right? And once you go to the login screen, then if you actually, write your username and password and you log in, it will take you to this discover page. And then from the discover page, you go so on and so forth. If you tap one of the images, it'll take you to a preview of it. And there's even like the keyboard that pops up. So there's just a lot of different views and different things that happen, right? And so, yeah, so you can do that through Figma after you're done, creating your wireframes and designing the actual look of it. You can actually kind of bring it to life by creating these prototypes. And that is something else that I want to show you guys. So you can actually use a fully working prototype. And the cool thing too is that when you select here prototype, you can select which device you want to test this out on. So right now it's an iPhone 10, but I can do iPhone 11 Pro, and it will show you how it can look in that platform. Here I have an iPad mini, for example. So let's do the iPhone 10 like we had at the beginning. So when you actually want to prototype it, you can hit the play button here, and this is what's going to pop up. You're going to see pretty much a preview of the application this way. So I had already been playing with it. I logged in and everything. But yeah, this is like, it gives you pretty much a real preview of how your application looks on the actual phone that you're developing this for. Or if you're developing this for all phones, then you can see how it looks in every single phone out there, right? So you can see how when you click here, it will take you to the preview, and then if you exit, it will go back. There's a search functionality here, and then that's where the keyboard part pops up. So obviously that's not fully implemented in this in this template, but you would actually tap the numbers and the letters, and you can do your search. It will show you the results here. So this is a whole gallery of photos. You can, I guess, tap the photo. Well, I guess not. Yeah, so this is not fully implemented, but you get the idea, right? So you would eventually just tap here, and it will take you to the actual photo. See more actually expands it, so that actually works. This is now the chat. So this is how the chat is implemented. So you can click here. You can see the chat. Here's a profile of Jane. She has her photos in there. You can follow Jane, message her. Messaging is not implemented either. So, but what you could do at that point is just point this to a new screen and then build how that would look in this case, right? Here, this plus is just to add, I guess, a photo. That doesn't work either. But you guys get the idea, right? You pretty much just create this prototype that you can play around with. And it's all really about like how much time and how much effort you put into this. So you can make it so that it's fully functional. But also you don't want to do too much, right? Because you don't want to like spend too much time creating every single part of this when you know that there's a bit of a template that you're using. So for example, with Jane's profile, you don't have to create more profiles for every user. You just create one that you can just use to test it out and see how it looks. and go from there. You know, when you actually code the application and actually put it out there and have more users, there would be a lot more profile pages, and they all look the same pretty much. Is what you have designed here. So yeah, and then again with the prototyping, I haven't tested this out, but I'm guessing, I mean, it should work, right? So if I test out the iPad Pro 11, ooh, okay, so this is how the mobile app will load in the iPad Pro. So for example, I'm guessing this mobile app wasn't pretty much built to run on tablets. So if you were to put this on a tablet, this is how the application will look, I guess. It pretty much just looks just like the mobile app. But yeah, but this is a great way for you to see, you know, how your application can actually look in different environments and different platforms. And it's just really handy. You know, they even have like Apple Watch like templates here. Surface, so it's not all just Apple stuff, Google as well. So it's really handy to be able to prototype this. So yeah, and after you prototype this, pretty much at that point, you're able to start, let's say, coding your application. So as I mentioned before, these tools actually provide you with a little bit of code, at least for the styling sometimes, if you need it. So for example, if I go here and I go to code, I will get the CSS for the elements that are in this frame. So the position, the width, the height, the background, this is just, you know, for the background itself. If I click this button, it'll give me also the width, the height, the left, top, all of that for this button specifically. So this is what's so great about this too, because when you're actually coding your mobile app or website, you can literally just copy this, take it, put it there, and it will literally just match the same style that you used for your prototype and look at and try to, you know, have it look the same way. Same thing here, you know, you have a login. It will give you left, right, top, bottom, and even the font families that you're using, how the items are aligned, the spacing and the colors and all of that. So, so yeah, there's a lot of really good info that you can get out of this and use it to actually code this out in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever you use to actually, you know, make, in the case of a website, happen. So it's a really powerful tool, and I definitely recommend you guys check out Figma. So, so yeah, now I'm just gonna pretty much check out the questions, see if you guys have any feedback. Let me see. So when designing, how important is it to consider the different countries your users will be from? Not talking about language differences, but cultural differences. That's really important too. And that comes with the whole empathy part of like designing your product. If this is like an app that you're, let's say, going to launch only in the US, well, even if you launch it only in the US, like there's so many different cultures in the US, it's kind of hard to really pinpoint one way of doing things. But I think you should definitely, you know, consider everybody's backgrounds when you're designing and how they can use the application. And again, not just like the languages like you're saying, but just, you know, different ways of like accessing the application and being able to use it. You know, and it just reminds me, for example, of accessibility, right? You want to make sure that people who maybe are colorblind can actually use the application, right? And how do you go about doing that? You maybe select colors that, you know, that are universal that everybody can see, or just keep maybe like a colorblind mode in mind that, you know, people can actually use to be able to use the application in case they're colorblind. So there's like different ways you can do that. Xd doesn't do that. Yeah, that's right. I see Shana also helped answer here, and I agree 100%. So target audience, again, that's what really this depends on who you're designing this for. Will be really important in how you create your design and your application. And accessibility, again, see, Shana, you touched on all the points, so that's great. I see you have a question too. So when designing, how important is it to consider the different countries? Wait, oh, it's the same question, okay. What kind of resources, books, videos, articles would you recommend to anyone interested in learning more about design? So there's a lot of great, you know, UI, UX resources online. You know, during the time that I've been learning about it, you know, I've been playing with it and just really implementing it. I've been able to, you know, find different courses that are really good. You can also, you know, even just, I would say like, you don't even have to go through a course. I think something cool that you can do just from the very beginning is just download one of these apps. download Figma, download Xd, download any of these. They usually come with pre-built tutorials that you can go through and just play and mess around with. Sometimes like your learning doesn't have to be so structured where it's like this is step 1, this is step 2, this is step 3. These tools are so like intuitive and easy to use and just simple that you can easily just open, let's say, Figma or Xd or Sketch and just play with the tools, see what they do, see what the text tool does, see how the pen tool works. It just kind of helps you to familiarize with that, and it makes it a lot easier to really get into them. At least that's how I got into Illustrator and Photoshop back in the day. And when I was in middle school, I started learning that, and it was just about jumping in, just messing around with the tools, and just learning all of that. And it's really important to do it that way. Yeah. So does anybody have any other questions? Anything else? Any feedback? Any questions you guys might have? Oh yes, I completely forgot to mention. So Behance Dribble and Canva templates, like Shana said, those are really good if you want to get inspiration. It's really important to look at what people are doing, because like I said, there's certain design systems that are set in place. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. There's design systems out there that people use, and they're out there for a reason, right? They're out there because they actually work. And like I said, users are already used to like using these design systems in a way already. So sometimes it's more effective to just use what's already out there than just creating your brand new design system, which users might struggle to use. What's a generally well-known company who constantly releases good design that influences your work? Well, as you can probably see from my PowerPoint, those of you who might watch like Apple's keynotes and stuff, definitely Apple is one of those. I just really love, how they blend in the hardware with the software, and you guys know that their marketing is up there, and it's really nice. So Apple is definitely one of those. Most recently, when working with UPE's branding and stuff, I also really looked a lot at JetBrains and the different applications that they have, and just the look that they got is just really cool. So there's different pretty much brands and some really good ones that just make everything look so effortless. And I think that's something that tells you that they have good UI UX when something is just effortless and there's no like pinpointing things. It just works. It just looks nice, So that's something that it's really important as well. Does UI UX and software engineering go hand in hand? Yes, they do a lot. Pretty much the UI UX portion of it. I mean, as a software engineer, you don't have to like do the UI and UX. Sometimes there's companies that have UI UX roles, people who are strictly just do the designing. So pretty much everything that I just talked about, they focus on doing that. They focus on doing user research. They focus on prototyping, on doing the wireframes, on testing and all of that, and then creating a final, let's say, prototype that then the software engineers can take and actually code it out and make it happen, right? But there's other companies where they might not have UI UX designers, or just I feel, at least for myself, I like that I can control both the design and also the technical aspect of just the coding, right? So I think if you have a really good background in design, it really helps you in the whole entire process when you get to coding your application. It just makes it a lot easier. So for those of you guys who are majoring in computer science, IT, or any other tech fields, and maybe maybe you might not be a design person, maybe you're not very artsy or anything, just know that I would say definitely recommend for you guys to at least get into UI UX a little bit, check out these tools, see how you can actually lay these things out. Look at other examples, you don't have to start from scratch and have no idea how to lay out like a form or like a web a landing page. Look at these templates that are provided to you. Look at what other apps are also doing, like on your phone. Check out like the Instagram app, the Facebook app, Spotify's app. Check all these apps out and see what kinds of layouts they're using, the buttons, the colors, the contrast, and all that. So that way you get some inspiration. That way you see how you can do it on your own as well. So definitely take a bit of time to learn UI UX. I think for software engineers who might not have any design background, it really helps to kind of bring the whole experience together from from all the way from beginning with user research all the way to deploying the application after you code it. So Google's Material UI, it definitely, yeah, I would definitely recommend that. Nike's branding guidelines. So yeah, I love Nike's branding too. Nike's really good at the way they do things and the way they brand their products, and it's really effective. In my past internship, the design and IT departments were separate and never interacted with each other. Besides the design team sending over designs for us to code and implement, how can we bridge a gap between two departments who are essential for each other but who rarely interact? Yeah, so that's a big problem that I have seen, that sometimes like design and IT or engineering are kind of separate teams or just separate departments overall. And there's like little communication, between them. And again, that's a major problem because it just, it breaks the whole process. And it's just kind of hard really for the, designers to, I guess, work with the engineers and get what they designed actually implemented, and engineers might have trouble maybe understanding why something was designed a certain way, maybe giving some feedback. So this all depends, I guess, on the companies and the startups and the ways that they work. But I would say, at least from my work at JP Morgan, we have a UI UX team that works closely with us for development, and so we would have like a meeting every couple of weeks to like meet with the UX team and just have them look at the application we're building, get any feedback, look at the design systems and all that, and see what kind of progress we're making. Something that really helps too is that the UX team, for example, they released their own design system for developers to take a look at and just use for their platforms, for their applications. So pretty much I was able to, go to their internal website where they posted their design system and pretty much all the specs, like the colors, the size and all that kind of thing. And then I was able to pull from that and build my application around the design system that they published for everybody to use. So that's one way I would say that it has worked, at least for me, within the company. And then there's tools like Figma, like I was just showing you guys, that really now you can collaborate. So you can literally share the link with the engineers and they'll be able to really see what you're working on currently, what the design looks like, and they'll really be able to get feedback right away, leave comments, and they can just take in some of the elements that you're doing already. So it makes just things more seamless that way. I agree. There's a lot of really good questions. Thank you guys for asking them. Maybe having weekly or bi-weekly stand-ups between, yeah. So like I was saying, I was meeting with the UX team every couple of weeks, pretty much to just give an update on how the application was looking like and just getting any kind of feedback. What if I told you my tech lead and another SE did create a template of the company's colors on the site? Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, some companies, I guess, prioritize more like the UX and UI aspect of things and the branding overall. There are some that don't really prioritize that too much. Personally, as somebody with a design background and also branding and marketing as well, I really think branding is super, super important, and it's something that really, helps your product come across to the users and just make just a better experience overall. I guess since it's just PantherHacks and it's organized by UPE, I can mention how through UPE we were able to kind of build a brand to get students really involved and just a look to us and our programs and the things that we do. So I think branding is really important. Same thing with PantherHacks, and now I was actually involved in the branding and the aspect of it, and we try to really make it look like something that the ShellHacks team was doing as well. If you looked at the ShellHacks team, you'll see that the ShellHacks logo is kind of using the same fonts and all, just a different color gradient. But pretty much like the language and the logo and the look and all of that, we really try to have similar, so that way people know and understand when they see the PantherHacks logo, it's like, oh, this looks like the ShellHacks logo. And that's because this is organized by ShellHacks. So we wanted to create that kind of connection. The same thing with UPE and all the programs we have, right? Every program has its own like color schemes and uses different gradients, but they all, have the same kind of look where you can tell these are like UPE programs that we have at FIU, and that right away. So that kind of creates a sense of connection. It makes things a little more professional. It makes people want to engage more with the brand. it's just a win-win for everybody in the end to have better branding and better UX. Alrighty, so I do think I'm over my time, but I'm so happy to answer a few more questions if you guys have any. Other than what you mentioned, what other tools, programs do you recommend to make UI? Well, so like I said, the three that I mentioned are the most popular ones. Something that I used at the very beginning was just, just Adobe Illustrator at that point. I think this was before XD came out, before anything else came out. Illustrator, pretty much I was just building the different wireframes and different sketching out the different screens for a mobile app or the website on Illustrator. Doing it that way. Pretty much any other kind of graphic application that you can use. I mean, I wouldn't recommend you use like Paint, for example, to make these things. I guess you can create wireframes with Paint. That'd be pretty easy to do. But when there's tools like these that are out there that are free for you to use, I think it's definitely worth the investment to take the time to learn them and actually, do them through that. So, all right, guys. I'm up for one more question if you guys have any. I agree with Shauna. I don't think it'll be very, it won't be a great UX for you. Let's put it that way. And yeah, again, I'm also going to be available this whole day. If you guys want me to take a look at your projects that you're working on and you want me to see the UI or just see how things are looking, I'm more than happy to check it out, give you some feedback. So you can just post that in the UI UX channel, or if you want, you can go to the mentor channel and I'll do that as well. Yes, so if you're on the Discord, you should be able to see me on the right side, I believe, under organizers and mentors. So you can just DM me through there. My username, I believe it's just my name. You'll see my name, Cesar Villa Garcia, on the right side of PantherHacks, and there you go. Thank you, Shauna. So you can contact me through there, and I can give you some feedback on that and whatnot. Yeah, it's my real name. I was just, being a bit professional, All right, guys. So thank you so much for coming to the workshop. I hope you enjoyed it, got some good content out of it. I'll be saving the presentation and I'll actually upload it. So I'll put the link in the UI UX channel so you guys can take a look at it and check it out. So best of luck in the hackathon and have fun for the rest of the day. All right. Thank you, guys.